Welcome to this fabulous event, Marinus and Bordeaux. Tonight is really exciting, and we're going to be doing two things. We're going to be learning a little bit about the Marinus history, and we're going to be tasting wines from Bordeaux. And there's a lot of overlap between those two things. My name is Allison Lee. I serve as the Director of Marinus Strategies at the University of Dayton. So my role is working with the Catholic and Marinus identity and mission, diving into this history a lot and talking about it and sharing it with everyone. So thanks for taking time to learn about it. And I'm going to now turn it over to Bill Whiting to introduce himself. He is our wine expert.
Hey, thank you, Allison. Good evening, y'all, from a snowy Long Island. First, I want to thank Mackenzie for setting up all of this, and also thank you to you, Allison. I want to thank Taub Family Selections for the wines. Also, Vin Porter, because most of you bought the wines from them, I do believe. And most importantly, we want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. This won't be possible without all of you. A little bit about me real quick. I am a recent graduate of UD. Actually, it was yesterday, 30 years ago yesterday. So hopefully we have a few 1990 classmates here this evening. I got my start in the wine business, believe it or not, in Dayton. I worked for a company called Heidelberg Distributing, and then I came back to New York to work for a wine company that was actually founded by my grandfather in 1919. So, and next year marks my 27th year in the wine business, and I don't know where it went. It was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the next 27 years. Just some housekeeping reminders and issues. Remember, we're tasting two wines tonight. We're tasting a white and a red. The white is going to be first, and then the red. Hopefully you had a chance to open the wines. And in between the wines, I would suggest maybe having a cracker or a piece of bread just to cleanse your palate. Other than that, just remember that wine has only one purpose in life, and that's to give pleasure. So let's have a pleasurable evening. And Allison, it's all yours.
All right, thank you very much, Bill. I'm going to start tonight by talking about the Marinus history, but one other housekeeping detail, or actually two, I wanted to remind you of before we dive into that. If you have questions throughout the evening, for either myself or for Bill about history, Marinus history, or about wines, please feel free to submit those through the chat. Or through the Q&A button that you have on your screen, and we will be doing the Q&A at the end. So we'll take those and we'll monitor all the questions at the end. And secondly, this program is being recorded and will be available on UDigital. So if you have to step away for any reason, or you know someone who would like to see it, we are recording this, so it will be available to you later. All right, with that, we are going to get started. I'm going to talk a little bit about our founders. That's the focus for this evening, because they actually spent most of their life in and around Bordeaux, France, which is where our wines come from. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And we're going to go into this, some of our history and how UD came to be, really. And what I want to do to begin this, I'm going to talk about each of the three founders a little bit in more detail. But what I wanted to do to start is give a sense of the big picture, where they were, what times they lived, because I think no matter how much you know about the Marinus, this part can get confusing. And it's easier if you think about it in sort of a big picture framework and what were some of the important events. So we're going to start. You see that the history here is spread out, and I'm going to give you some dates here. So the oldest Marinus founder is Marie-Thérèse de Lamoureux. And she's probably the least famous of the three of them. But she was born first, and she was born 2 years ahead of Father William Joseph Chaminade. And you can see both of them lived fairly long lives, especially for that time in history. Marie-Thérèse living to be 82 years old and Chaminade living to be 89. These numbers are calculated in case you are like me and don't want to try to subtract all of those numbers in your head. We make it easier for you. And then our youngest and the shortest lifespan founder is Adèle de Betz de Trinquilion. I did take a little bit of French, but I know my pronunciation is not perfect. So if you were a French major, I know you'll probably handle those pronunciations better than me. But she lived only to be 39 years old. As you'll see about her, she lived a long or she lived a very full life and did a lot in those 39 years, as did the other two, but she just had less time to accomplish all that she did. You'll also notice what came up at that time is the French Revolution. And this is a key, the key event. It's really the reasons the Marianists exist. Like I said, I'm going to go into this more, but that happened in 1789, the same year that Adele was born. And you'll see that that happened in about the middle of both Chaminade and Marie-Therèse's lives. So it was very formative in their experience and in ours as a history. The lay Marianist communities, a lot of people don't know this. The Marianists were the first groups of Marianists were lay people. So people like you and me, not ordained, not vowed religious. It was a lay group that started in 1801. So they were the very first. And that was after the French Revolution, shortly after the French Revolution. And then the Marianist Sisters came next in 1816. I'm going to, again, talk a little bit more about Adele and founding the Marianist Sisters. And the Marianist Brothers and Priests were the last in 1817. So they were founded the latest. And we'll say a little bit more about why all that is. But just to give you a sense of timeline and when they lived, we have that right there. And then you'll see this is 1850, and that's when UD was founded. So we go from 1750 to 1850 on this timeline, and that's the same year as Chaminade's death. So it looks pretty short when you put it all together that way. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about region. Like I said, I like to give everyone a big picture. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a scope of where they lived and where they traveled to in their lifetimes, each of the three founders. And this is the area we're focusing on, the area in the red box right there. So you'll see it's a little bit the border between France and Spain primarily. And I'm going to zoom in on that. So you can see this here closer, and this is going to take us to where we begin. And that is in Barsac, just a little bit outside of Bordeaux, which is where Marie-Thérèse was born and lived for the first 12 years of her life. Her parents were old French nobility. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Adele. She was from a much wealthier family. Marie-Thérèse, though, was also nobility when she was born. Father Chaminade was born in Périgueux, France, a really small medieval town, very beautiful town. The Barsac is very close to Bordeaux. Périgueux is about an hour's driving time outside of Bordeaux. So to give you a sense of the scale, that's about an hour's drive. Marie-Thérèse moved to Bordeaux when she was 12, and she really lived the rest of her life there. So she's centered in Bordeaux. She actually has a street named after her in that city. Chaminade took a little bit different route to get there. So he was born in Périgueux, and when he was an adult, he was the 14th child of very religious parents. He moved to Moussadan, a really tiny town. Périgueux is a lot bigger than Moussadan. And that's where he was serving as a priest and a teacher. He was a physics teacher, a bursar of a school. So that's the work he was doing in this very tiny village. And that's probably where he would have spent the rest of his life had it not been for the French Revolution. Meanwhile, Adele is born in Agen. So again, it's also a little bit more than an hour outside of Bordeaux, a little bit different direction, as you can see. And she's born at the very beginning of the French Revolution to a very wealthy family. And if you know anything about the French Revolution, you know the wealthy weren't the most popular. That's kind of why it started. And since she was from a wealthy family, she was exiled, and I'll get into that in a second. But this is the beginning of the French Revolution. Adele's born, Chaminade has to go to Bordeaux. And I will talk more about his life, but he had to go to Bordeaux to be in hiding. Living in these small villages as an ordained priest was not a safe place for him to be. He refused to take an oath of allegiance to France. He said his allegiance was to God. And so because he took that oath, his life was at risk, and he had to move to a bigger city where he could live in hiding. As I mentioned, Adele was also part of the nobility, or that side of the revolution. So her family was exiled to a town in Spain, a very beautiful place called San Sebastian. It's right on the coast. Again, just a very beautiful spot. But it was there that Adele came into contact with Carmelite nuns, and that's when she really kind of discovered her vocation as a very young child. Age 11, I think she was, when she came into contact with them and decided that that was what she wanted her life to be. So that was a significant place in her life. This is, again, French Revolution, towards the end of the French Revolution. Chaminade was very good at hiding. And because of that, he got on his name got on a list of people who were no longer living in France. They thought he was already gone. And so when he came out of hiding and it was kind of known that he was in Bordeaux, he had to leave. So he was exiled to a town in Spain called Zaragoza. So again, just across the border, but at his time in life, taking the transportation that he would have had, it would have taken him a couple of days to get there. Currently, it takes about a day via train to get there, but that's really just more to do with crossing borders and the time that it takes because of train schedules, not because it really actually takes that long. Finally, after 3 years in Saragossa, Chaminade came back to Bordeaux, where he spent the rest of his life, and that is where the Marianists were founded. So I think that takes us through the map and gives you a little bit of an idea of where our Marianist founders were living and traveling to during their lives. I hope that helps you get a sense of the region we're looking at tonight. So when you're tasting these wines, you get a sense of place. I have some pictures from some of these places too. We'll go more into that. But before we do, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Bill right now to talk a little bit more about the wines, and then I will go more into the history.
Awesome. Thanks, Allison.
Sure thing.
I have a slide. I have a little bit of a presentation as well. My first slide is actually a slide of France. And when you look at this, it's very interesting because you see Texas. Actually, believe it or not, that France is roughly the same size as Texas. Texas is actually slightly larger. It's about, Texas is around 268,000 square miles, and France is 260. So again, what I want to do is I want to give you an overview because I'm not sure how many of you have actually been to France or Bordeaux. So, but believe it or not, France also is one of the leading wine producing countries in the world. Right now, the rank is Italy is number 1, France is number 2, and Spain is number 3. And usually it alternates back and forth between those 3 countries. One thing about the wines there, most people think, of course, red is predominant, and then white, and then rosé. But believe it or not, the French love their rosé. So rosé was overconsumed or more consumed than the white wines. And when we're talking about grape varieties, there's actually more than 100 grape varieties that exist and that are approved in France. The next slide is actually the wine regions. So this gives you an overview of where everything is. So when you look at that, you'll see where where Champagne is, which is in the yellow. That actually there to the left is actually where Paris is. Then you have Alsace, where the green is to the right. You have in the red, you have Burgundy and Beaujolais. Going down south, you have the Rhone, Châteauneuf-du-Pape area. Then you have Provence in the pink. To the left, you have the Languedoc and Roussillon, and then the Loire Valley, which is in the turquoise, and then the blue is where we will be talking about, which is Bordeaux. The next slide is actually a map of Bordeaux. And you can actually get this off of the Bordeaux wine website. So most of the countries, whether it be Spain, Italy, or France, they have consortios or governing bodies, and they produce a lot of great materials, and you can go and you can get them. But this is actually the map of Bordeaux. And so some cool facts about Bordeaux is the history of Bordeaux actually dates back to the ancient Romans. They were the first people to cultivate plant vineyards there and produce Bordelaise wines. And the Romans took over this area in about 60 BC. The name actually, Bordeaux, basically means beside the water because you have the Gironde River right there. So, and of course, when you have the river and you're next to the Atlantic Ocean, you have a lot of oyster farms. So there's over 300 oyster farms there. So when we're having that first wine, really one of the great things to have with a Bordelaise white is oysters. It is a largely maritime climate. And in 2007, Bordeaux, the city of Bordeaux, was actually declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Now, I wanted to put this into perspective because I know most of us know Montgomery County very well. So my next slide is kind of wicked. It's kind of hazy, but you see the line that's there and you see some red, that is Montgomery County. So when you look at the area, So Bordeaux, there's approximately 280,000 acres of vineyards planted. The size of Montgomery County is 300,000 acres. So you can basically imagine that all of Montgomery County will be planted with vineyards and making wine. That's what Bordeaux is. Their populations are not similar, but I mean, there's close to 1 million people in Bordeaux and about 500,000 people in Dayton. And in size wise, Bordeaux is actually the 5th largest city in France, where Dayton is the 5th largest, Montgomery is the 5th largest county in Ohio. The next slide is, you might get some people talking about, when they talk about Bordelaise wines, they talk about the left bank or the right bank. So as you can see there, the left bank is highlighted in the blue and the right bank is highlighted in the red. The left bank is primarily gravelly soils, it's graphite-driven red wines, and Cabernet Sauvignon is king here. It is the dominant grape variety. The right bank, which is located there in the red, is known for its red clay soils that produce very bold, rich, plummy red wines. And the grape variety that is there is predominantly Merlot. And actually, Merlot is a predominant grape variety in all of Bordeaux. The next slide actually shows you what the vineyards look like. And of course, you can see, we'll go to the next slide, please. There we go. And there's the river. And there, of course, you see the vineyards are planted everywhere. So it's absolutely stunning. When we talk, go to the next slide, we talk about Bordelaise wines. So Bordeaux wines, when most people think of Bordeaux, they think of red wines. There are actually, believe it or not, there are 8 different grape varieties that are planted here that you can use to make wines from Bordeaux. Those are Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Malbec, Petit Verdot, Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, and Muscadel. Most of the wines, a majority of them, are blends. So they usually blend one grape with the other one. And again, like I said before, Merlot is by far the dominant grape variety in Bordeaux. 60% of all of Bordeaux is Merlot. And the reason why is because it's easier to grow because it ripens earlier than Cabernet Sauvignon. There's many different styles and diverse styles of wines. So as you can see here on this slide, 84% of the wines that come from here are red. Whites, actually, that number has gone up. That's actually close to almost 11%. And when you taste this first white wine, it's awesome because, don't tell anyone, but I actually prefer Bordelaise whites over the reds. You can make rosés. As I mentioned before, rosé is more popular than white wine in France and even in Bordeaux. They also make sweet wine. Bordeaux is known for one of the greatest, and that is Sauternes. And then you can make crémant, or basically sparkling wines as well. Their average production ranges anywhere from 70 to 75 million cases annually for the region of Bordeaux. And if you ever go to Europe, whether it be France, Spain, or Italy, and you say, what is your production? A lot of the producers, they go by bottles. They don't go by cases, because you also have to remember that in Europe, everything is a 6-bottle case, where over here in the States, it's a 12-bottle case. So they just say bottles. So they average around 800 to 900 million bottles of production a year in Bordeaux. And there's approximately 8,500 producers. We're not going to get into wine laws, but they do have their wine laws. They're called the Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée, or the Controlled Original Appellation. And the one thing I want you to remember in regards to wine laws, it doesn't matter where it comes from, whether it comes from France, Spain, Italy, Chile, Argentina, Australia, United States, Canada, Mexico, China, no wine law guarantees quality. The only person that can guarantee the quality is the producer, because he or she is putting their name on the label. So just remember that. And the other thing you have to remember is, drink what you like. That's the most important thing about wine. But what's so great about Bordeaux is it's changing. And there's a younger generation of wine growers. They love their red wines, and they're making better red wines than they have in the past. These red wines are brighter, fresher, and they're ready to drink earlier, but they all can still age. And you'll taste that here shortly. Again, as I mentioned before, they're dry white wines. They are growing leaps and bounds. And I'm telling you, I really do dig this Bordelaise white that we're going to be tasting here shortly. There's also more innovation, of course, with technology and comes better innovation. Yet, but they do respect the traditions and the heritages, and they want to make a return to the elegance, so the way the wines used to be years ago. And I like to say sometimes they like to take the traditions of the past, blend them with the innovations of today to make wines for tomorrow. And then, of course, it's all about sustainability, organics, biodynamics, and they're very environmentally conscious. Um, okay, so we're gonna ready for the first wine? Yeah, okay. So what I wanted to talk about is the producer here real quick, because this producer is Chateau Lafite Rothschild. Now there's two Rothschilds in Bordeaux. There's Chateau Mouton Rothschild and there's Chateau Lafite Rothschild. So Chateau Lafite Rothschild and Mouton Rothschild are both first growth estates, and they're located in the Pouilly appellation of Bordeaux, which is on the left bank, and both make exceptional, long-lived, and extremely expensive wines. Their two estates are run by different branches of the same family tree. And what's also funny is they're no more than 2 miles apart from each other. So it's awesome. Chateau Lafite Rothschild was purchased in 1868 by Baron James Meyer de Rothschild. And now his great-great-grandson and granddaughter are running the business. So, and this wine is called Legend or Legend. And it all started back in the 1990s. And Lafite Rothschild wanted to offer the consumer and the wine lover a discovery of the different terroirs and the tastes of Bordeaux. Terroir is basically the soils, the microclimates. And they had to find a name, and they wanted a name that could live up to the expectations, a hint to the Rothschild family and the rich history of Chateau Lafite. So basically, they wanted to say a legend was born. And here, this is the wine that we're about to have. So it should be, everyone should have gotten the 2019 vintage. And this is actually a blend of two different grape varieties. As I mentioned before, most Bordelaise wines are blends. So this is actually a blend of 85% Sauvignon Blanc, 15% Semillon. Again, the predominant white varietals that grow in Bordeaux. Now, these grapes were actually harvested at dawn in order to preserve their delicate aromas and their freshness. And that's what you're going to get when you taste this wine. There is no oak aging. So sometimes when you have a wine that is aged in oak, you feel like you're picking splinters out of your tongue or somebody hit you over the head with a 2x4. No, I like freshness, and that's what this wine is. So when you look at this wine, you're going to notice the color. The color is very light straw colored. And that's perfect because it is a very young wine. Usually when wines age a little bit more, they have a golden yellow color to it. And when you get really older wines, then they're going to have a darker color. But also be careful, because when you have a young wine and has a very dark golden yellow color to it, it could be heat damage. So just be careful. The nose on this, what I love, and the one thing is I cheated a little bit. I actually opened this bottle last night because I wanted to see how it tasted over a period of a day or two, because like me, I can't finish both of these in one evening. Well, maybe I can, but not tonight. But I wanted to see how these wines last when you drink a little bit, you put it back in the fridge, and it's absolutely stunning. And the one thing you get on this is the nice floral and the mineral notes. You get like tropical fruit. If some of you have actually smelt a lychee fruit before, you get pineapple, you get lime in it. And it's very, very refreshing. And then when you taste it, believe it or not, I actually like drinking my white wines almost at a room temperature, because you can hide flaws and impurities in a wine that is bone chilling cold. That's why it says on a bottle of Boone's Farm, serve very, very, very cold. But again, you can see how the winemaking is and how great this wine is. This is very fresh, nice citrus, acidity. If you were to stick your tongue out and get toothpicks and punch the side of your tongue, that's what acidity feels like. And what do you pair with this? Well, what I say, it's a maritime climate. You have the river, oysters. And if you go to the next slide, oh man, there's over 300 oyster farms there. That's what you get when you go to Bordeaux. What's kind of cool is if any of you ever think about taking the cruise lines, they actually, the ship stops at the very tip in an area called Les Bourdons, and they get in the buses and they take you down. Actually, some cruises might even stop in Bordeaux. I think Viking might have one, but it's awesome. And you go there and you can have all the oysters. I love shellfish, so this is the perfect. I could eat a dozen oysters and a bottle of this, and I'm happy. So I think that's it for the first wine. Allison.
Yes. All right, thank you. That was, first of all, delicious. And I really liked hearing all of it. So thank you. We're gonna get more on the wine later, but we're gonna go back to we're gonna go back in time a little bit. So we've got a current wine, but we're going back in time to Bordeaux again. So I'm going to share my screen here. Here we go. And we're still on the map, but we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna move forward from here. Oh, we got back. Adele moved back to Agen. So there you go. So she actually spent a lot of the rest of her life near Agen, France. I'm going to skip through this for a minute. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about our founders and why they are such remarkable people. I did not think I was a history person until I started learning about Marianist history and realized I really love it. Marianist history and the history of our founders is really it's quite dramatic. And what I like about this slide here, this is a picture of Father Chaminade. It gives you a little bit of a synopsis of his life and how much he had to adapt and adjust because of what was going on around him. Now, one of the key Marianist values today, something we still talk about at UD all the time, and especially this last year, is the importance of adaptation and change. And you can see why here when you look at Chaminade's life. At age 31, he wanted to establish that school in Mussidan, France, and he was unable to do that because of the French Revolution. As ordained clergy, he was not allowed. He had to go into hiding and continue his ministry in secret. At age 48, he had this dream of re-Christianizing France. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Napoleon was in and out of power during the early 1800s. And I know Napoleon has quite a reputation. Some things he did were beneficial for the Marianists, and some things were not. So he was in favor of religion in some ways, but he didn't like religion he couldn't control. So when Chaminade was forming small faith communities, Napoleon did not like that. That was a little too rogue for him, and he squashed that effort. In fact, Chaminade went to prison for 100 days in his lifetime. So this is kind of a little known fact, but that was part of Napoleon's reign. He didn't like what Chaminade was doing. At age 69, he wanted to establish teacher training colleges. So education was always really important to Chaminade. From his early ages to later in his life, he really valued education. But the anti-clerical government again suppressed that dream. So the government there was a lot of change in power during that time, and Chaminade's dreams and his plans and ambitions really had to adjust based on who was in power. And finally, again, another kind of little known fact about him, he founded the Marianist order at 84. He dreamed of having a vowed religious order, men and women dedicated to Mary's mission in the world. And at age 84, so he has 5 years left to live. Of course, he doesn't know that, but he's almost overthrown by all of his followers. So they got mad. There was a lot of infighting. It happens, but he was almost overthrown, and yet he persisted through all of this. And I like to say at the end of this, there's 3 Marianist universities in the United States and 19 high schools. So I like to think that Chaminade won and eventually achieved his dream. I also, one of the things that is unique to the Marianist order, unlike Jesuits, Franciscans, other orders that you might know of, the Marianists do things in groups. They do things together. We have 3 founders. There were 4 founders of the University of Dayton. They don't work alone. And this is at the Madeleine in Bordeaux. This is the Chapel of the Madeleine, where Chaminade formed his small faith communities. So this picture was taken in 2018. So if you were walking the streets of Bordeaux, you might stumble across this chapel, and you see the doors are open to you, and that's Father Chaminade's statue above the door there. In fact, when you look closely at that picture, you can see it says G.J. Chaminade. So Guillaume the French William, Joseph Chaminade. So there's a couple of ways that his love for groups is evidenced in the way the Marianists were founded. One, he worked with 2 women. That is way ahead of his time. And when he was 47 years old, you saw the timeline of their lives. Adele was only 19. So they were founding these orders together and working together with that kind of age gap. Marie-Thérèse, obviously much closer to his age. She was his close collaborator and partner for over 40 years. They were very close. They worked together seamlessly. She wouldn't have been able to continue her ministry without him, and vice versa. He really relied on her work and all that she did to support everything that he was doing, from his underground ministry to the small faith communities and sodalities. He really was a big believer in using the gifts of each person. He believed that everybody brings something unique to the table. And I wrote, he had them invite friends. When Chaminade, so the Marianists were started by a lay group. It was a small faith community, the sodalities, that met in this very chapel that you see on the screen here. There were 12 in that initial group, and they were made up of all different classes, all different types of professions, chimney sweeps and teachers, and all different kinds of jobs. The French Revolution values of fraternity, liberty, and equality were things that Chaminade thought were important. So that was the values expressed by the revolutionaries. They weren't the nobility. Chaminade was more in alignment with the nobility because he was part of the church, and that's the way the church was aligned. But he really believed in those values. And so when he was founding these small Christian communities, he believed in bringing people together from all different backgrounds. He thought that was essential. And then he had them invite their friends. And that is how his faith communities grew. So it was a very grassroots movement. That's how he formed his communities, and how that ministry continued and continues today. We still have Marianist communities. The vowed religious live in community with one another. They still do their work together. It's a worldwide community, but we still believe in doing things together and not alone. They're not individual missionaries going off. They're missionaries that do the work in the place they are as groups. Finally, another really important part of Chaminade's life that I want to touch on tonight, and there is really, like I said, there's a lot to look at in the history here and in their life and in their stories, and just crazy things about all the ways he avoided death when he was in his underground ministry. But Chaminade was exiled to that town in Saragossa that I mentioned. He had to spend 3 years there. He went against his will. That's not where he wanted to go. France was his home. If you can imagine just being sent to another country for 3 years in kind of a surprising way, he had to leave within a matter of days when he got this decree. So he goes to this place. This is Our Lady of the Pillar. There's a huge basilica in Saragossa. It's like enormous. There's multiple chapels inside of it. And this statue is really only 18 inches tall, so it's not very big. He spent 3 years every single day praying at this statue for guidance on what he was supposed to do when he was able to return to France. And during that time, he had the vision of forming these small faith communities. And that Madeleine, the Chapel of the Madeleine, is where he would do that work when he was able to go back. But his vision was that new times called for new methods. The government in France and the way things had happened because of the revolution, he couldn't go back and do things the way they'd always been done. There wasn't structures in place for that. A lot of the government had taken over buildings, church buildings, schools, all kinds of things. And they couldn't go back and retrofit the way they were doing ministry to the way France was existing right then. This quote that Chaminade is that's attributed to him for saying is this being like a brook that makes no effort to overcome the obstacles in his way is a testament to his patience and to his ability to look at the circumstances that were in front of him and say, I'm going to find a way to grow past them, but I'm going to do that with patience, with calm, with prayer and reflection. Spending 3 years praying for what he was going to do when he went back. He kept in touch during this time with Marie Therese through letters. He found a way to grow broader and deeper so that he could overcome the obstruction without sort of trying to blast it out of his path. So his approach of reflection and prayer is, again, another really important way that we like to look at obstacles currently. But adaptation and change, this is a big part of it, and it's a big part of our mission today. So I'm going to end that here. We're going to go back to our second wine tasting. That's a little bit about Chaminade. Like I said, there's more that we can say about him, and there will be time for questions. We'll take a look at the women founders after having another few sips or glass of wine. So I'm going to stop share here and turn it back over to Bill.
Awesome. Great job, Allison. Okay, so now we have the red wine. And I was just looking at the white, and I noticed that on some of the technical information that you might have had from the from the white wine, it said that there was another grape variety in it, but it's actually not. It's see, it says there, it says 50% Sauvignon Blanc, 40% Semillon, 10% Semillon Gris. It actually is 85% Sauvignon Blanc, 15% Semillon. So, okay, now we come to the reds, and I like to say with reds, drinking white wine is like kissing your sister, but drinking red wine is like kissing your lover. So let's, I know, but I like white wine anyway. So we'll try the red. So this is the 2018 Legend or Legend Bordeaux. And this is actually a blend. I know it says on this tech sheet, it says 60% Cabernet Sauvignon, 40% Merlot. But with this vintage, the 2018, it is actually 50% Cabernet Sauvignon, 50% Merlot. 60% of the aging actually takes place in stainless steel to give it that freshness. And then 40% of this is aged in oak. Now, when you age wines in oak, oak can give wine a lot of complexity. And when you have a wine that is aged more in oak, it's going to be, like I said before, sometimes it can feel like you're picking splinters out of your tongue or somebody hit you over the head with a 2x4. When you actually have red wines that are aged in oak, there's many different styles. So the oak actually, the newer the oak, the more pungent, the more potent it's going to be. And the longer the oak ages, whether it be 1-year-old, 2-year-old, or 3-year-old oak, the longer it is, the softer it is. So this oak, 40% oak, is probably at the say maybe 2 or 3-year-old oak barrels. So it's going to be very gentle. It's not going to be overpowering or aggressive. So I said the wine is aged in stainless steel tanks and then aged in oak. The color on this, and the one thing I love about Bordelaise reds, and even your simplest everyday Bordelaise red, is it has a beautiful crimson color to it. That is so, for especially a young wine, it's very vibrant. In the nose, what you get is you get a lot of fresh fruit. You're getting red currants. I'm picking up raspberry, and then on the end, you're getting a little bit of mocha. Now, the one thing is, I've been doing this a long time, so I get certain characteristics. And I'll never forget the one time I was doing a seminar and I mentioned the fact that I was getting this exotic black cherry, and somebody raised their hand and said, "What's black cherry?" Not everybody knows what some of these nuances are, but the thing is just trust your own ability to taste and enjoy it. Maybe you've had raspberries your whole entire life, so when you smell something that has raspberry, you'll be able to pick it up right away. But that's a beautiful thing about trying all these different wines and going to wine tastings, is to educate your palate. And like I said before, the most important thing is drink what you like. Please your own palate. So again, the fresh fruit on this, it just jumps right out at you. And I think this wine is, for me, this is something that you don't want to sit in your cellar for a long period of time or your wine fridge. This is something that you want to drink young. So I like to say this is a nice dinner red, and it goes great every day. Let's taste it. Wow. Nice, I say easy fruit, very silky, but you do get a little bit of that, it's a little rustic a little bit in a way, but it's very fruit forward in the finish. And you get that oak. So it's really beautiful. And something like this, you definitely want to have it with grilled meats, whether it be beef or lamb. You can have it with cheeses, charcuterie plates, actually even some nice chicken wings, or a spicy chicken sandwich from Wendy's at 2 a.m. in the morning. You know, it's great. You know, this is awesome. Yeah, this is stunning. And again, I actually I can't wait to try this tomorrow. And I always like tasting wines, you know, now when you open it and then giving it time. And that was one of the reasons why I asked you to open the wine a little bit, you know, about an hour or two, to get it, to let it aerate. Because remember, wine is a living thing. It needs to breathe. So so I hope you like these two selections. I wish we would have been able to have a Sauterne or a Barsac, but it's been very, very challenging to get those. But I do want to take the time on the next slide to thank a few people, of course. And here's some information if you're interested in finding out more about Bordeaux. And I think we should do a road trip. I think we should do a history lesson. Allison, you give the history lesson with Father Shamana. We go over there, and then I'll set up all the wine tours and everything else. But you can go to Bordeaux website, and that is the official governing body of Bordelaise wine, and it's bordeaux.com/US. Also, I want to thank Taub Family Selections. You can visit their website, and also Vin Porter. I know some of you actually bought the wines from them, so I really appreciate that. And then if you have any questions, or if you're going to be traveling anywhere overseas and want maybe a few suggestions for restaurants or whatever, my email is on the bottom. It's whitingwine at gmail.com. And then last but not least, so the next slide, this is the reason why I'm going to be drinking this whole entire bottle of red wine tonight, because I'm not going anywhere for the next 24 hours because we're expecting to get about a foot of snow. And that was probably taken about 2 hours ago. And I'm looking out the window right now and it's ugly. So if you're on the East Coast, join me in enjoying this bottle. And if you're not, you can enjoy it as well too. Back to you, Allison. Thank you.
Yeah, wine doesn't need a reason, right?
No, exactly.
Yeah. And I'm sign me up for that trip. I'm in. It's wonderful. I would love to go back to Bordeaux and get the best of all of the wines there. So we'll work on that for when we can travel again. I'm going to go, we're going to go talk a little bit about the women founders, and then we're going to have some time for Q&A and answering some questions. I see some are coming in here, so we'll manage that. But I want to share a little bit about our amazing women founders before we get there. And they are Adele on the left and Marie-Thérèse on the right. And just two remarkable women. Again, their history, it's really kind of unbelievable when you find out what they accomplished in their lifetimes and what they had to face to accomplish some of those things. So I'm going to start with Adele, the younger one. She, again, I mentioned she died at age 39, very young, of consumption, tuberculosis. So she didn't live a very long life, but she did a lot. And she is considered the founder of the Marianist Sisters, or FMI. You can see below, I took this picture. So there was going to be this, I was there for her beatification. So she's blessed Adele now. This is a picture of her home. And I kind of left the people in it so you can get a size of the scope and scale of her house. That whole green in the front where the staircase is, that's another level of the mansion. There was like a ballroom in there and other things. And they were getting ready to have a musical about her life at the, they called it the Chateau. I always feel like Chateau sounds a little smaller than that, but I know it is French word for castle. So, so this is where she lived. She grew up very, very wealthy, and her life was committed to the poor, to serving the poor, to helping the poor. In fact, one of the things I think is interesting about her is I mentioned at age 11, she came into contact with the Carmelite nuns and knew she wanted to be vowed religious. She actually asked her mom if she could join the nuns right then. And her mom said, you have to wait a few years. We'll talk about this when you're a little bit older. So Adele decided that she had a rule of life written for her by one of her tutors. She followed that. She believed in contemplative prayer and she loved that, but she also really liked service and action. So she would serve the poor out of the kitchen of this house when she was back in Agen. And that was just an important part of who she was. So when she was working with Father Chaminade to found the Order of Sisters that would become the Marianist Sisters, one of the things that was important to her was that her order wasn't cloistered. So at that time when religious orders of nuns were founded, they were all living in cloistered lives. They weren't out actively doing service, but that was very important to Adele. So she had this blend of contemplation and action. It's one of the things I admire about her, and one of the things I love when we're talking about the Marianists today, that we do both. We take time for reflection, we take time for contemplation, much like Chaminade when he was in exile. And we go out there and we do service work and we do advocacy and we work for justice. So that's all part of the UD education currently. And it really goes back to our founders and their roots. One of the other things I love to mention about Adele is she was a prolific letter writer. So there are two very big volumes like this thick of her letters that we have. So that's just the ones we have. That she used to keep in touch with people throughout France, friends, encouragers. She kept in touch with Chaminade through letters, and they're wonderful to read. Some of them are, the language is of that time, so it reads a little bit differently, but there's just some ordinary moments in those letters as well, and things that she struggled with. But she believed in using these letters as a way of encouraging people in the faith, and encouraging and uplifting other women who also wanted to grow in their faith. It was just an important part of her life, and we can benefit from reading those letters today. So that is actually how she formed the community. She called it her Cher Projet, or Dear Project, that would become the Marianist Sisters. At one point, she had over 200 people as part of this, mostly women, as part of this project, keeping in touch through letter writing, and they lived throughout France. They covered an area really about the size of the state of Ohio. And if you consider the transportation in those days, they wouldn't have been in touch in any other way. They had to keep in touch through letters. So that's just another remarkable thing about her. And again, she worked with Chaminade to get that order founded, and Chaminade believed in her idea, and she actually needed him as an ordained clergy to work with Rome to get the order founded the way she wanted it to be. And then Marie Therese, she's really in the United States considered the founder of the lay Marianists. So the communities that came first and that are still very active today, there's lay Marianist communities all over the world. She was a lay person. And as I mentioned prior to this, she was a partner of Chaminade's for over 40 years and instrumental in his ministry continuing. Part of the reason for that is because she kept him alive. So during the French Revolution, he had to be in hiding. And one of the things I love this story about Marie Therese that she did is she worked any job she needed to. She was really scrappy and really pragmatic. And so what she did is she worked as a custodian in the police department, and she would read the names of the people that the French police were after and then go let them know. So they would go into hiding or whatever they needed to do to stay safe. So she had a huge role in keeping some of the priests that hadn't taken that oath of allegiance to the state alive and keeping that underground ministry continuing. The other thing that she did, and this is what's a picture of here on your screen, is she, when Chaminade was founding the sodality, she was going to help him with that, and she did help him with that. But she was called to serve at the Misericorde, which was a home for prostitutes who wanted to leave that life. And it helped them it had meals and things like that, but it would help them find other work. A lot of the women who were serving as prostitutes during that time were doing it because they didn't have another means of making income. It was desperate, and it was what they felt they had to do. So when women wanted to leave that life, they had to come there voluntarily. Marie Therese eventually, she didn't want to go there at first. She didn't think that was what she was called to do. And she gave it some time and some prayer. And she realized that was where she belonged and that she cared for those women. And so that's where she served the remainder of her life. And this is the front door of the Misericorde in Bordeaux. It's still there. I'm not doing the same work, but it's still there as a building that you can go visit. And again, I mentioned she was really scrappy and knew how to she didn't have a lot of money, and she would find ways to get the money that she needed. And there's jokes, or not jokes, but stories that have been passed down about her banging on the tabernacle saying, "Jesus, we need money." So she knew, and she would turn to prayer with that, but she also turned to her own resources. And again, another story I love about her is that she had the women at the Misericorde making cigars as a way of earning money. And they were supposedly the best cigars in all of southern France. So in the region, the cigars that they produced were wonderful. So they were well known for that ministry, I guess. But it was a way of funding the mission that they needed. So it was part of her work, and it was just one of the many ways that she was very resourceful and did what needed to be done to make sure that she could continue her ministry and her mission. So it's one of the things I like to share about her. But again, she has a street named after her in Bordeaux. We can go visit it and on our way to dinner and having some of these delicious wines. But I wanted to share a little bit about that in her life and how instrumental she was in both helping Chaminade, but also in her own work, and especially at the Misericorde, where she is beloved and still remembered today. All right, I am going to stop share, and we are going to move to questions. So I'm going to take a look at the chat here. Let's see. I'm just going to read through these really quick. Okay, so this I think is to Bill. If we can't find the wine in our area, do you have another suggestion for a red wine, and do you always chill your reds?
Yes. Actually, if you can't get these wines, send me an email or I put on there, what state are you from? And I can find out, because every state is different with their laws and the regulations. I always do chill my reds. Believe it or not, I have a wine fridge and I keep it anywhere between 50 to 52 degrees. And, the worst thing is when you taste a red wine when it is warm. And when I say room temperature, some people think room temperature is like 70 degrees. Room temperature should be a little bit lot lower than that. And when you have a red wine, when it's about 50 58, 59, 60 degrees, you get more of the fruit essence. Instead, if you have it really warm, all you get is a lot of tannin and alcohol, and you don't really get all the fruit. So yeah, I definitely do enjoy it. But when I have my wine, if I have it in the cellar, I take it out about an hour before and let that temperature, come up just a little bit. And what, did I miss a third?
Nope. Well, I do have another one for you. So you didn't miss it, but I have another one for you. So do you have a suggestion for a red wine for a ham Christmas dinner?
Absolutely. So usually when you have turkey and you have the holidays like Thanksgiving that we just had, and you're having the upcoming holidays, one of the universal food friendly wines is Pinot Noir. And you can get Pinot Noir from, of course, in France with Burgundy. You have a lot of great Pinot Noirs that come from California and Oregon as well. I actually prefer the Pinot Noirs that come from Santa Ynez and Santa Barbara. Also, you can get some great reds from Tuscany. We said we just had all the Bordeaux. You can get some nice, great everyday Bordeaux reds. You can get some Rhones as well. I also love the Tuscan red wines. They're pretty simple, straightforward. When I say Tuscan red wine, I'm talking Italy, of course, and maybe like a Chianti. Also, one of my favorite areas that I was actually supposed to go visit recently, but it got canceled because of all this craziness, was Paso Robles. And you're starting to see a lot more red wines coming from Paso Robles as well. So those are pretty good. But remember, the most important thing is drink what you like.
Wonderful. Thanks, Bill. The next question is, what brought the Mariners to Dayton? And that is a little bit of so I don't have all the answers to that, but I can tell you they were in Cincinnati and they came over. So there was Marinus in the Alsace region in France. So actually German speaking Marinus, and they were over in the United States and in Cincinnati. And during the cholera epidemic, they came up to Dayton to help with that and wanted to found a school to help German immigrants, really. The access to the education was different than it is now. And if you came from, there was just a lot of discrimination against European immigrants. So they wanted to found a school for German speaking immigrants. And they came to Dayton to help with the cholera epidemic and ended up doing that. They bought the Stewart Farm. So Stewart Hall is named for the Stewart Farm that they bought. And with that land, decided to found the school there. So that was part of what they were trying to do. Someone asked about where Chaminade's gravesite is located. And I can tell you that what I'll do is I'll get the information. I've been there, so I know where it is, but I need to get the specifics of it. And I can get that information out to you perhaps after this. I will, if we can communicate with people who are registered, I'll send you the specifics on where it is, but it's not too far outside of Bordeaux again. So all of this is really within driving distance if you're going to Bordeaux. Any recommendations? So this one for Bill is for vegan meals, for wines.
Yeah. Again, Pinot Noir is great. There's, the sustainability and organics and biodynamics is a huge market right now, and it's thriving. And you can find a lot of places actually have their own sections for all these wines, and they come from all over. And they make all different varietals too. So it's not like it's just one grape variety. You can find organic, biodynamic wines, and but all any type of wine that you enjoy goes with all types of food, whether it be meats, whether it be fish, vegan, whatever. Just drink what you like. But I think the organics and biodynamics. I actually love the wines. We actually. I know a friend of mine who has a winery down in Chile, and the winery is called Emiliana, and they make some of the best. You won't even know that these wines are organic or biodynamic. They're rock stars. They're like Led Zeppelin. They're amazing. And by the way, they're good, and they have sustainability. Even the glass is made with recycled glass. The labels made with recycled paper and seaweed. So everything is amazing. So there's so many great choices. I wish we had this many choices back in 1990.
All right. Okay, if not a normal red drinker, do you have a recommendation for a red to start with?
A red to start with. Pinot Noir, really, because Pinot Noir can be many different styles, but Pinot Noir is very fruit forward. It's very elegant. I guess the question, if that person can answer me or send an email to me, what was the last red wine that you had that you enjoyed? and I can probably go from there to figure out where they're going. But Pinot Noir is pretty universal, simple. If you're starting to drink reds and you just want to get started, Pinot Noir never offended anybody.
Wonderful. Do you have a favorite year for the region? I'm guessing for Bordeaux, for Bordelaise wines.
I don't know. I'm partial to the 90s. I wonder why. 1990 and 1997 was a universal great vintage throughout all of Europe. I mean, it didn't matter whether it was Spain or France or Italy. It was a fantastic year. So I like that. I mean, 2000, I think 15 was good. I honestly, my cellar, I need more improvements with the French selection. I mean, I'm more of a Chateauneuf du Pape guy, and I pretty much drank a lot of my Bordeaux's years ago. But yeah, I'd say 2015 is good. But I like the older because again, when you have the wines and they sit, remember, especially some of the finer wines, they need time to just rest. They need time to just chillax. They need time to all come to a different level. And so that's why we always say with those fine wines, and that's why you should do your homework. Find a really good producer, and if they make really good wine, I just bought a bottle of a Spanish Rioja, and this wine they said don't even touch it for another 4 or 5 years. So
Wonderful. Thanks. I got asked what my favorite Marinus, who my favorite Marinus is. I probably shouldn't answer that one on something that's recorded, but I'm going to for today. So I love them all. But if you're looking for of the three founders, gosh, I like want to answer this politically correctly because I really do love them all, and I feel like they all have something to teach us. I will say one of the things I respect about Marie-Thérèse, I think she's underappreciated. She's actually not recognized as a founder in parts of Europe. I'm not really sure why, but I love her. I love how practical she is. I think she's a great example for us today because I think we can think of vowed religious people as being sort of really holy in a way that's inaccessible. And she was so pragmatic and so down to earth about what she did. She knew her holy mission, but she knew ways to accomplish it given the circumstances that she had and given what was and given what resources she had around her. So I think I don't know if I want to say she's my favorite, but she is a great role model. And I think a really great role model for today. And I would say she has a lot to teach us that I think is often overlooked. So I hope that's a fair way of answering that question. But it's great. They're all good. Okay, so we have time for one more question. Okay, I'm going to give you two, maybe Bill, if you can answer them both. A rosé recommendation, and how long should wine be aerated?
okay, rosé recommendation. Oh, rosés. I was doing some research last year, and hopefully they said by the year 2025, about 15% of the total U.S. wine market will be consisted of rosé wines. Rosé is exploding. Everybody makes rosé, and what makes rosé so universal? I say a recommendation. I mean, of course, the original of rosé was Provence, and they make great rosés there. But everyone's making them now from all over the world. And there's the nice thing about rosé is there's so many styles. You have to remember this: every wine can be made into rosé, but where do you get the color from? It comes from the skins. So if you were to get a Cabernet and a Sauvignon Blanc grape, and you were to peel the skin back, the pulp is clear. So trivia question, can you make a white wine from red grapes? Absolutely. It just all depends on the skin contact. So, and that's the thing about rosé. That's why there's different colors. There's a different spectrum of colors, but also with rosé, there's a different spectrum of flavors. So you can get some rosés that are really, really bone dry, or you can get some that are really, really, really sweet. So that's the cool thing about the adventure of rosés, is to go out and find what you like. I mean, I love every country, every region is producing a rosé wine. So that's what I love about going to wine tastings. I know most of you, I think some of you are all Ohio or Dayton, so Arrow Wine, Dorothy Lane, they all do tastings, and it's fun to be able to explore and find something that you like. That's the journey. And then how long should wine be aerated? Well, I give an analogy is like if you were to get on an airplane right now and fly from Dayton to Australia to Melbourne, and you get off the airplane, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to shower, you want to relax, you want to just stretch out a little bit. Well, wine's the same thing. It's a living thing. It needs time to breathe. It needs time to aerate. And sometimes actually I've had wines that have even older vintages, my birth vintage, believe it or not, where I've had some different bottle variations, and I've opened one bottle and I'm like, oh wow, this needs a lot more time. And then like 4 or 5 hours later, the wine is still beautiful. And then I've had some where you open them and you'd be like, all right, get everyone's glass up. We got to finish this now because it's going right off a cliff. But aeration, especially with younger wines, is extremely important, even your white wines as well, because it gives that time, that wine to breathe. Now, I know most of you open your wines and I hope you have a little bit left, but maybe another hour or so, try it and see the difference. There is a difference in it. And if you're going to do it overnight and you're going to keep it, I would suggest putting it in your refrigerator and then of course taking it out, let it come to room temperature and try it again. It might be even better, it might not be, but that's all part of the fun about exploring wines.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bill. And thank you to the Alumni Association for putting this event on. It's just been a joy to be with you. And I love this juxtaposition because if you have the chance to go to Bordeaux, it is a wonderful place to visit, not only for history, but for food and drink. It's amazing. So I can't recommend it enough on all levels. We are going to send a follow-up email with information that was shared tonight. So look for that. And just a huge thank you all for taking the time to be here and making time to learn more about these two great topics. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and we look forward to seeing you at the next alumni event sometime soon. And feel free to contact Bill. He shared his email at whitingwine@gmail.com, and I can be found at the University of Dayton. We'll share more information about that, but I'm really easy to look up on UD's website under their Office for Mission and Rector. All right, thank you all. Have a great rest of your evening and enjoy the rest of your wine.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.